This is TWIS, This Week in Science, episode number 1026, recorded on Wednesday, August 20th, 2025. What is your science policy? Hey everyone, I am Dr. Kiki, and tonight on the show, we will fill your head with plants for robots, jackalopes, and bat hugs. That sounds nice. But first, thanks to our amazing Patreon sponsors for their generous support of TWIS. You can become a part of the Patreon community at patreon.com/thisweekinscience.
Disclaimer. Authoritarianism is nothing new. It rears its ugly head every half century or so, manages to persist malignantly in some places until it can be removed from power once again. What follows is a slow process of reforming society around freedoms lost, truths and knowledge forbidden. Progress is made towards peace and prosperity. At some point, the generation that suffered through, fought, and overcame the past authoritarian movement dies. Collective memory fades. Struggles of modern life evoke nostalgia for an age that never existed. At first, it's a form of escapism, an indulgence in magical thinking, an over-idealized past stripped of all its failings. Power-hungry narcissists pounce on the opportunity, readorn themselves in the pageantry of strongmen, promising return to the mythical old ways as a path to the future. Arrogance, ignorance, revisionism promenade around as pride. Manufactured hatred is presented as a justifiable cause, placing the failure of the world to be perfect upon the weakest, most vulnerable targets. With increasingly divisive rhetoric, blaming of the others, all of the others, so many others, it's hard to see who would even be left if every other went away. Anyone that pushes back on this propaganda, who challenges lies with truth, becomes a co-conspirator, becomes an other. Journalists, teachers, historians, scientists, comedians, if it doesn't matter who you are, if you're not licking the boot, you will find it at your neck until you fight back. And fight we will with This Week in Science coming up next.
I've got the kind of mind that can't get enough. I want to learn everything. I want to fill it all up with new discoveries that happen every day of the week. There's only one place to go to find the knowledge I seek. I want to know what's happening. What's happening? What's happening this week in science? What's happening? What's happening? What's happening this week in science?
Good science to you, Kiki and Blair.
And a good science to you too, Justin, Blair, and everyone out there. Welcome to another episode of This Week in Science. We are so thrilled to be back together once again, all of us able to get our power to work, our internet to be strong, and our children to agree to bedtime. Or to go outside and chop wood, in my case. I hope everyone is doing well this week. And we've got a fantastic show in store for you. We are joined by a guest tonight, interview with a science policy expert, Adriana Bankston. I've got stories about baby brains, making plants for robots, and translating your inner thoughts. What do you have for us, Justin? Yeah.
I have a mystery hominin skull that has finally been dated. And I have reversing autism symptoms with an epilepsy drug. May have found one of the key ingredients within the brain that has been causing some of the downstream symptoms of autistic traits.
What is in the animal corner tonight, Blair?
I have jackalopes and I have bat hugs.
Hey, if you have jackalopes, you better bring jackalopes. I've been fooled enough times. I've been fooled enough
We'll
times
see. I'll see what I can do for you, Justin.
Fooled
It's
in
a
the
rabbit
mountains
with
of
natural
Wyoming.
antlers. Nothing else will be accepted.
We'll see.
All right. Looking forward.
It's not a yes, it's not a no. I will tell you that.
It's complicated as so
You
many.
know how many times I sent my $3 to get those X-ray glasses? Were in the back of the comic book. The ads never worked.
All right, everyone. As we jump into the show, I do want to remind you that subscribing to TWIS is one of the best ways you can support this show. Head over to twis.org. You'll find links for subscribing to some outlets. If you find us on Facebook, Twitch, or YouTube, you can subscribe and watch our weekly live streams or the recordings of them. We also have our podcast that you can find on pretty much any podcast platform that's out there. Once again, our website is twis.org. You head over there. We also have our Patreon where you can help support this show in an ongoing way, or our Zazzle store link. That'll head you over to our merchandise so you can buy some cool stuff. But right now, it is time for us to dig into the science. And as we do so, I'm going to bring our guest for this evening to the stage, Dr. Adriana Bankston, and I'm going to, we are crowded in here tonight, so I'm going to give us a little space on the screen.
Oh, there we go.
There we go. Adriana Bankston has a PhD in biochemistry, cell and developmental biology from Emory University, and currently works as a AAAS Science and Technology Policy Fellow to support federal scientific research innovation in the U.S. House of Representatives. Adriana works at the intersection of scientific research, higher education, and STEM workforce development, with a focus on science policy to advance our nation forward through evidence-based practices and inspire the next generation to get involved. She is an advocate for scientific research and innovation at the federal level. Welcome to TWIS, Adriana.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you so much for joining us. We, for years, we've been bringing science policy and politics into our little science show, and it's been, up and down. Sometimes people say, "Don't add your politics to my science. Don't add the science to my politics," right? But now it has come to a head, and over the last few years, this year especially, we seem to be talking about science policy and science-related policy and funding more and more and more. And so we're interested, as these people in our various states and towns with science enthusiasm and backgrounds, but how did you get into working in science policy?
Yeah, so first I'll say I've been around science really my whole life. My parents are both academics. I've been in the university world forever. Thought about doing academia myself. But I think, over the years have kind of gravitated towards how can I use my PhD for doing something good in the world, and also informing the public and folks about what science can do for them. So kind of long story short, to present day, I guess, I initially worked for a small nonprofit, California, and then had a couple of jobs in DC, working with Congress, trying to push for better policies that are evidence-based, and also really not knowing a whole lot about really what it's like to be in Congress itself, obviously, but knowing that this is sort of where things happen. I think I've been a lot on the other side of trying to, highlight what we can do, but also, as scientists, as citizens, folks in the public that want to influence policy before I really came to where I'm doing today.
So what you're doing now, like, you actually are working for a state representative or a congressperson, and tell us who you're working for and what are you doing? Like, you're actually on Capitol Hill. You're in there.
Yeah, so it's been an interesting and also unusual year to be here, but I think to the context of this podcast, it's a good time to have scientists in a role like this. But yeah, so I work for Representative Bill Foster, who's the only PhD physicist in Congress, currently one of few members that have science backgrounds, which plays an interesting role to what the work we're doing, because he ran for Congress to support science, and that's a rare thing, but also interesting to work for him. So, day to day, and again, thinking through, right, what's happening this year, but the sorts of things that we do, introduce legislation to support science and research and education. We co-sponsor bills from other members. A lot of this is very collaborative as far as having different members support each other, bills and letters. We did send letters to the Trump administration talking about our disapproval to all the funding cuts happening and firings, NSF specifically. So in that sense, and also the other thing I was going to say is we do, they do a lot of speeches about why science matters and kind of showing congressional support for that and for young scientists who are trying to figure out their futures. So this year, it's been obviously a combination of trying to think about what the members interested in. As staff, we do have some influence as to what's being done, but then you also have district issues that they work on, right? They have to respond to constituents in the district and also all the national issues going on. So it's a lot to balance at any given point. But I think this year it's been even more so kind of a balance of our day-to-day work with, how do we respond to all the things going on in the administration, right? So
you started this, it's a year-long fellowship that you're in right now, and so you started it prior to the new administration. You've had about 6-7 months of 6 months of each, just about, if we were to split it. But so what kind of changes and shifts did you see in the attitudes towards science, if any at all?
Yeah, hard to say. It's sort of slow at first. I think because I also joined at the end of September, end of last Congress, things were pretty slow. A lot of, some members in the House, including Bill, got reelected. So we're sort of like, let's wait and see what happens. And then everything kind of took off in January, right? So I think for me, I didn't really know what to expect. I was sort of like, I want to see kind of how Congress works. What do they do? You're really like in the weeds of everything, right? But for them, they said that, well, we have, been in this situation before in previous Trump administration. So that's part of the work, is like, you're working with people who have done this before and have been there for many years, and you're still plugging into a system that we're like, okay, we kind of know what to do. But even then, I think even for them, it was unprecedented.
I think it has been unprecedented, yeah.
So in some ways, I think, it's nice to have some of this prior knowledge and credit to the office, because I think it's one of the few offices where the staff tend to stay on a long time, which is not usually the case in Congress. So people come and go pretty often. But testament to kind of the culture that they're building there, and their staff do tend to stay and have gone through a lot of different administrations. So I think, one thing I wanted to say is, seeing a lot of, concerns from young scientists, right, and their future, talking to them, trying to understand what they can do and, how Congress can help them, which has been interesting to be on the side. Obviously, and again, to kind of what I alluded to in the beginning, the impact in the district, we're in Illinois 11, which is close to Chicago, having, impacts in the universities in the state, but then also just having both constituents and other folks calling us and saying, what is Congress doing for science, right? So there's that. Local issues, but then also broadly more national concerns.
Yeah, and I think that's, where you are, you're looking at it from this kind of federal lens, right? But at the same time, y- you're privy where you are to all these things that are happening and learning about the processes in Congress and you know, how the sausage gets made, right? From
Yeah.
outside, it's like, oh yeah, we vote for people, and then they go, and then they vote for things, and then it's like this battle back and forth now between the two parties, but um, it's also it's a little opaque for people who aren't in politics, I think.
Hmm.
And I don't know. I mean, I think when we think about it, like is making a phone call to your representative, is that really helpful? Like like from what you're seeing and the work that you're doing, like when people say call your representatives, like is that honestly a really good step that people can take to help?
I mean, we pick up every phone call, so not everyone does. I think again, testament to a member who cares and the staff that does.
Yeah.
I think if people want to get involved, there's different things you can do, right? You can email, you can call, you can come to meet with us. Do a Capitol Hill Day, kind of different levels of engagement, right? All the things help. From our side, we do have a system where all the phone calls and emails go into a database, which then gets some sort of response.
Mhm.
So there is either something more general, like, thank you for calling. If there's something really specific people call about and they want to know, we do call back or respond to emails. So I think,
Mhm.
those don't go into the void, if that's a question.
It's
Yeah.
really, I think it's good to know these things because sometimes
Yeah.
it's like, okay, I left a message or I sent an email, and you're just like, did that do anything at all?
It's been interesting to see that. Yeah. That there is a system where these things go and they do get responded to. Yeah.
What is the sort of general level of support for science
Mhm.
right now?
It's hard to say on our end. I work for a Democrat in a Republican House, so right, it's to be frank about that, being a minority is limiting in the sense of certain things are not moving.
Mhm.
Um, However, there are a few Republicans that support it for different reasons, and these are some of the things we've done. For example, we've introduced two immigration bills that are both bipartisan. My boss leads one of the caucuses, which is basically like a club of members that come together on different topics they're interested in, and we do events on the Hill. That's also bipartisan. So there are, and also there's other members that have science backgrounds that are Republicans too. So I think there are, you know, a few people that we know are going to support it. There's a lot of new members that came on in this Congress that are, for example, on the science committee because they're interested in the topic, right? So I think like
Yeah.
the base is growing. There are certain things that seem to go better on the other side, as far as, like I said, immigration,
Mhm.
loss of talent, competition with China. There's some topics that do seem to resonate on both sides. Not
Hmm.
everything will, but and again, you have to know kind of who the allies are, right?
Yeah, because my impression has always been sort of that there's an element of theater about it. Like these are largely people who went to pretty good colleges, should have been exposed at some point to scientific method, or at least an understanding that science is a real thing, technology that we've driven from it, medical care that we've driven from it actually exists in the real world, but maybe for a political reason have chosen to oppose. So I'm sort of like, is it like, yeah, I understand like maybe a stem cell treatment, I understand it's good science, but back home they won't let me vote for it, or is there fundamental misunderstanding in those leaders of what science actually is? Maybe they skipped all
Yeah,
their science
great
class
question.
I
all the way
Yeah.
I
through.
think you're right about how do I put this? The voters, I guess, make a big difference, right? If they sort of, that's part of the job, I guess. They have to listen to what the voters are saying. I think still there's very few members that even know what this is or have a science background of any kind, right? Again, this is an exception. This office is very science heavy and people know him for it.
Yeah, I
So
think
we're trying to
you're super lucky to be in that environment, and not having to fight too hard to tell Bill about about science. Here, this is some interesting new stuff. It'll support this bill.
Yeah, so I think there is, but I think also to your point, the other side of like, there is some growing concern. I think if anything has come out of this year is that there's more awareness that science matters and it impacts our daily life, and trying to create, find those day-to-day examples of things of science is like your cell phone and things that you use day to day. There's some science and research that went into that, and there's a scientist that designed something like part of that.
And I almost can't think of an illness that has a genetic basis that there isn't a stem cell treatment that's making fantastic progress towards.
Yeah, and I
so
think,
like everybody has to have people who've suffered from any one of those many diseases that this is working on, as an example.
And I think things like, the COVID pandemic is always a good example that most people can relate to that and say, yeah, the vaccines do work, right?
Yeah.
Trying to find those examples.
Yeah, there's an interesting place, and Adriana and I have met previously as a result of talking about science communication more generally, and something that was brought up by someone recently talking. They do climate science and climate science communication, and even with their family members, as there's new budget cuts and NASA's atmospheric and climate monitoring functions are being defunded and those responsibilities are being reduced, and climate science is being less and less funded, or at least it seems as though this administration is minimizing the funding of climate research. The family member said, it's like a passing of a pet or something. I'm so sorry about your climate change, your climate funding, and it's like, but it's not mine. it's this is going to impact you too, right? So I think the question is, where in your position interfacing, right? Having been a scientist, having helped scientists learn how to write policy stuff, and now actually being involved in the policy making, like where do you see disconnects? That people could that we can address more, like, what are we missing?
I think some of the stuff we've been discussing, more education as to where science is impacting us day to day, right? Even those sorts of things like, cell phone or anything that really has science basis. Climate, I think, is a little, more complicated in some ways. I guess I'll bring this back to what we talked about. Like, if we think about what's happening to the future of science, again, there are certain things that will resonate more on both sides of the aisle, right? I think it's interesting. I guess Congress is, a large body of somewhat individual offices. Like, so each office obviously cares about certain things, or members run because some of them are very pro-climate, and that's most of what they do, and people that want to work there know those things, right? So that's part of it, I think, like knowing the background of the members and like what they care about, what they're likely to support or not, and then going to those people. But again, like just making these points of where's science in our daily life, right? Or talking about COVID or something. There's some things that do resonate. Just have to find what those are, I guess.
So would you, with where you are, we've been talking a lot about, the big, beautiful bill, the funding of science moving forward, and which is going to impact everything in the future, our future students moving into the schooling, moving into the workforce, so much. Is the funding still the place that we need to be putting effort as citizens if we support science and research and development? Should we still be putting pressure on the funding aspect, or should we be working on other things? Like, should we be looking at specific departments like NASA, or where should we be putting our efforts based on what you're seeing?
Yeah, I think I'll kind of go back to this. Knowing who you're talking to, because, for example, members may have, for example, NSF or NASA in their districts. For example, those people are gonna care, right? Okay, those are good targets.
And that's what's kind of amazed me about the size and breadth of these cuts, is that these cuts should have resonated on both sides of the aisles because of the amount of research funds that were taken out of red and blue states. And there wasn't like the political will to even stand up for what's usually like the bring home the bacon kind of legislation that you should be, have no problem at home because you're really representing, but it was still allowed to fall away. I mean, university funding and research funding and all of this. It's just surprising. Like those are the things that you should be counting on. What you're saying, but like somehow it didn't seem to have an impact this time.
Yeah, I think the funding is still the place to go, but you have to be kind of strategic. But then the other side is, I think, also training, and again, depending on if the members are aware kind of what's happening to science, or they know a little bit about the pipeline. Like, we need to be training our students to be able to succeed in the workforce, in addition to just throwing money, like, here's, all this, but like, what do you do with that? And like, are we teaching them how to use this in the real world, right? So that is another aspect of, what has transpired, at least last year, around certain topics like AI, for example, which is a big topic that,
Huge.
There's legislation, supporting AI education. So some awareness that, these technologies are coming to fruition, or kind of to the front of people's minds now, but we're not training people how to use them, or we don't even know how to use it well, right? That's a big question. Like, what does it mean to even use AI in an ethical way, and teach people how to do that, and teach students that want to use it well. So that's the other side, I think. Part of it is money. The other one is like, how do we teach people to use technology as well, and the education side, or more the training side of it, which does resonate to an extent.
And that should be whenever somebody's making fun of a silly sounding study. Right.
Right. Yeah.
The thought that always jumps into my mind is like, yeah, well, we put people in jet planes to fly around in circles, burning, $100,000 worth of jet fuel because it's training. They're not in the air to engage in combat, and hopefully they never will have to. But when we're doing this for our researchers, then it's a problem that, they spent money researching something that might not sound obviously impactful right now, but we need all of that funding and all those studies to give people that practice, that flight time doing research, so that they can be part of, more impactful teams in the future. So that pipeline is the scary thing. You both touched on it, right? That if that breaks down, then we don't have trained pilots, or we don't have trained scientists who are going to make those contributions on larger scale or more impactful projects in the future.
Are you, from your experience on Capitol Hill, and you're coming to the end of your fellowship here, but are you Are you optimistic? Are you pessimistic for science? Like, I mean, can you say this out loud in front of an audience?
I, I'm optimistic, but that's just my personality, I think. And I think this is, something that my boss says too. You have to do that to do a job like this, because it can be really grueling. People call and say all kinds of things on over the phone. You just have to brush it off and say like, okay, got it, thank you for telling us this, whatever. And then go back to work, because you still have to do your day job no matter what people say. So I think there is like a certain,
It's like being a YouTube creator. No.
Yeah,
like
I know
this-
the bridge you're talking about. It's a little higher than I would normally jump off of, so I don't think I'm going to take the advice, but thank you for the recommendation.
I think, and that's part of the job, right? We have to listen to people who call us because they vote for us. People want to get reelected. But I think one thing, I think that I've learned, at least the people that I've worked with, want to do a good job. They care about science. I work for a good member who's trying to do the right thing, and I've somewhat have a renewed confidence in Congress. I think even like that's coming from, again, not knowing anything really about it, and working in this office. People do care and they're trying to do good things. Not everyone is, but some people are. So I keep going to those offices that are listening.
Yeah.
That's really encouraging to hear. I feel like from the outside looking in, it definitely feels like we're in an unprecedented time where, I hate saying that now, every day is unprecedented at this point, but that, science always used to kind of be, funding science used to be a crowd pleaser, right? Like it was an obvious yes. And I think there's this fear that we've talked about on this show that a halting of funding and a halting of support of certain fields of research are going to create a pretty big lag that we're going to have to spend a long time catching up from. And I also, part of me does also wonder that people aren't going to want to endeavor to do kind of longer term studies because, maybe I'm only going to apply to do this program for 3 to 4 years because I don't know what my next round of funding is going to look like. Right. So like, I'm just kind of curious if the kind of overall, kind of narrative around federally funded research is shifting in that way.
I think certainly that's true for, students and people who are in research now and saying like, okay, I'm halfway through grad school. What do I do? Like, I just want to graduate because I don't know if the grant will be renewed and that sort of thing, right? So it's a reality. We're not saying doesn't exist. We're just trying to encourage people not to give up on science, I think, because we still need talent. And, this is going to be, I think at some point, ideally, we'll kind of come out of this chaos and kind of rebuild some of this, because again, this has happened before. It's not the first Trump administration that's ever existed. It's probably the worst, but we've come out of this before. So that's kind of what I'm hearing.
Yeah, and it is also helpful for us to hear you say that there are Republican members of Congress that still support science, because we obviously mostly hear the loudest, most outrageous individuals, and it starts to feel like they're taking up more and more space in Congress. And if there are still people that, have some semblance of sanity when it comes to funding science and supporting science and believing in science, then it's easier to come back, right? It's just a few key players that are really rocking the boat as to half of the seats, right? And I think that I would like to be hearing more about that, even if I don't agree with everything that a Republican believes in. If they do still support and forward momentum on cancer research, I need to hear that so that I don't lose my marbles, right?
I actually don't want them to say anything, just in case that's the
fair.
thing that gets them pushed up.
I think
right now.
What I can say is we have some Republican friends that routinely support what we do and, co-sign on things. Like I said, if there's something like they have an agency in their district that's most likely their care because that's a lot of their voters and revenue comes from that.
Yeah. Has the the reality of the way that NSF funding actually impacts local economies, has that hit the consciousness of the representatives and Congress people that are doing the voting? Because it seemed like for a minute there, it was like everybody completely forgot what kind of an impact the federal funding of R&D actually has on the entire country.
Yeah, so I think one thing that's been happening, a lot of the members have been, I guess, more outspoken against what's happening, that including my boss, to doing, and this has actually been kind of part of the fun of the job, is to write speeches for him to talk about why science matters, which is, on C-SPAN or somewhere. So that does happen. I get to write those kinds of things. And
That's
those
awesome.
are out there. And then again, we are showing support. NSF obviously has been a big topic also because of their 75th anniversary, which happened right around when the work cuts happened too. And then we're like, how do we message this? That it still matters, and we're 75 years of all the good things they've done, and we try to highlight that instead of obviously saying what's happening. But
yeah
it's
a lot. Is there anything, I mean, we don't want to keep you for the whole night here. I appreciate you joining us from the East Coast, but if you could think about things that people should be putting kind of in their awareness right now, like what are some of the key points that you'd like people to know or to remember?
I mean, the one thing I'll say that Congress still cares about science, at least some people, and find those allies, right? Talk to members that represent you because you vote for them, and that's part of the job. And then I think, like, for me, a lot of it comes back to what's happening to the future of science and how do we make sure they don't lose that interest, which a lot of them are. But I'll say we try to include some of their views into the projects that we've been doing, like letters and speeches and other things that we do listen to the students that came to our office and talked to us. So if you have students who are listening to this, keep going to your member of Congress because they're there to listen.
Yeah, I think that's also, it's one of the things that is, hard for people to, sometimes we've become so dissociated from, especially Washington, right? It's so far away, but the political process in general, we vote when it's time to vote, but what other things can we do to really be a part of the entire process? And
and also, also remember that they do local events too. So we didn't talk about this, but in August when we were in recess here, they were at home doing events and meeting with constituents on the ground in their district. So if those sorts of things happen, like they do town halls and other things, so do go to those things because that's a good way to get in touch with them too if you're not in Washington.
Actually go to a town hall? What? Amazing. That'd be so good. Okay. Is there anything else that you want to share with everyone about your experiences and your hopes for science policy?
I guess my hope is that we'll come out of this situation and kind of see, rebuilding at some point. Some of these numbers I don't think are as bad as predicted, since that was some of that, I guess, was predicted in the budget, and then it wasn't quite as bad, right? I think, that just people keep believing that, science matters and keep doing their part in that in their communities. We still need to do that regardless of what's happening in DC. So.
Yeah. Think global, act local. We can all do it. Right?
Yeah.
I think it's always a good motto. So if people are interested in learning more about, science policy or the future of science and the workforce, and want to follow you online, where can they find you?
Yeah, so I have a website, also LinkedIn, Twitter, and Blue Sky. My website actually has all the channels on there, so happy to get involved and chat more.
Yeah, your website is great. It's very clear and it's got all sorts of wonderful information on it. It's great.
Yeah, go there.
You do a good job of keeping that up to date. I am not as good at
Thank
my
you.
own. I think mine is like from 2007 or something. Adriana, thank you so much for joining us tonight and telling us a bit about, your experience and what's happening up in DC and in Capitol Hill. And I hope, aside from, stay optimistic and keep doing the work that you're doing. And wherever you end up next, I know you're going to do some good things. So I'm glad that you're working for science.
Thank you. Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for joining us.
All right, everybody. We are going to take a break right now. Really quickly, I want to tell you all about more about This Week in Science before we come to our stories. That's right. We have got a website, TWIS.org. And if you love the show, I do hope that you will head over to TWIS.org and click on our Patreon link. The Patreon link is a wonderful way to support the show in an ongoing fashion. You can choose your level of support, $10 and more per month, and we will thank you by name. I will try to pronounce your name correctly at the end of the show in rapid fire fashion. Additionally, we have our Zazzle store, and there are all sorts of wonderful products that are contained in our Zazzle store. Many of them come from past years of Blair's Animal Corner calendars, and the artwork is just fantastic. All part of the proceeds always come back to TWIS to help keep us doing what we're doing. Make sure that we can pay for, all the infrastructure, the little things that keep the show going. And additionally, it would be really great if you shared the word about TWIS. Help us get the word out so that there are more people finding out about things like Adriana's position in science policy, and that this is a potential career path for people, that there are people out there working for good in science on Capitol Hill, local government, around the country. Lots of people who do believe in the potential for science and technology research and development to do a lot of good for our world moving into the future, and how we can all work together on that. So anyway, there's the more the merrier. Share TWIS with all the people who you care about. It's sharing is caring. It really is. And we really appreciate your support. We cannot do this without you. Thank you so much. All right. We normally start out the show with a bunch of news stories, but you know what? It's just time right now for Blair's Animal Corner.
With Blair.
She loves our creatures, great and small. Biped, millipede, no pet at all. You want to hear about animals? She's your girl. Except for giant pandas and squirrels. There's Animal Corner.
What you got, Blair?
I'm Jakalopes.
Really?
No,
really?
You do not. You better bring them.
What?
You better.
I don't know what to tell you. I don't know how to let this kind of guise go on. But this was all over the internet this week, so I wanted to talk about it. A group of rabbits were found in Colorado. They had different names. They were called Frankenstein bunnies. They were called zombie rabbits. They were called demon rabbits, and they were making the rounds on social media. They are, in fact, what is most likely the inspiration for the jackalope myth in North America. So this is the closest to real jackalopes you're going to get, because this is where the idea came from. But basically, these rabbits are showing up with growths somewhere on their head, in their mouth, in their nose, on their forehead, coming out of their eyes, that, I'm sorry, this is kind of gross. They're warts. They're wart-like growths that eventually metastasize, so that they're kind of, they become hard and they look like horns. And so they can also end up kind of branching to look more and more like horns. So if they're coming out of their eyes or their head, they look very horn-like. If they're coming out of their nose or their mouth, they look kind of like, I don't know, like a Giger-esque The Thing situation. But they're freaking people out. But the thing is, this is caused by a virus. And it's the Shope papillomavirus.
Oh.
It's been around. It was discovered 100 years ago. It's been around for probably much longer than that. In most cases, it does not harm the rabbit. The rabbit's immune systems will fight the virus, and once they do, the growths recede and disappear. Unless it's coming out of their eyes or mouths enough to interfere with eating, and then it can end up causing the rabbit to pass away. But in most cases,
it doesn't like hurt them.
It's just freaky looking. But what's interesting is the study of this virus starting 100 years ago. It was discovered by Richard Shope, Dr. Richard Shope, a professor at Rockefeller University, discovered it in the 1930s. And their study of this virus over the last 100 or so years has actually been really beneficial to human health as well, because papillomavirus, right? So it's actually helped to help to kind of draw the connections between viruses and cancer. So in humans, we have HPV, human papillomavirus, and that can cause cervical cancer. So it's a virus that can lead to somebody having cancer. It's not a direct virus causes cancer, but virus causes changes that make cancer develop, right? So scientists have been studying this virus to help understand the connection between viruses and cancer prior to them figuring out what was going on with HPV and cervical cancer, developing a vaccine, all these sorts of things. So it's actually a pretty interesting virus. It's pretty impactful on the scientific community. And so people who study these things are probably like, oh yeah, we've been seeing this forever. But because of the internet, some people saw this, flipped out, posted it online, and now we got jackalopes or Frankenstein bunnies just running rampant across your pages on the internet. But they are real. They are as close to jackalopes as we're going to get in the real world. Or almost like Cthulhu-esque rabbits. They're very strange looking. But yeah, they're fine. Most of them are fine. So there you go.
I think it's really interesting, and like one of the big questions. I don't want to share my search for other pictures, but one of the questions from Zombie Tom Hanks here is that the same virus as Tree Man? And so I don't believe it's the same exact virus, because what you're talking about is a papillomavirus that is specific to the cottontail rabbits.
Mm-hmm. And
looking in Wikipedia for this particular virus, there is the CTPV, cottontail papillomavirus, is also known as Kappa papillomavirus 2, which is really fun to say. But that's not a human papillomavirus.
It does look like Tree Man,
but it's a keratin
syndrome is also a papillomavirus, though. So it's related. Yeah, that's interesting.
That was exactly.
I did not know about that. These pictures are rough.
I was going to try and find pictures, and it was.
Yeah. So anyway, you can Google that at your own leisure. Yeah, I don't know, Justin, what do you think? Does that satisfy your desire for jackalopes, or are you disappointed?
No, I think that's an amazing possible source of the story. Yeah.
It's the first thing I thought of when I saw it, which is why I opened the story, even though the headline was all about the Frankenstein bunny, and I was like, that looks like the origin of the jackalope myth. Let me go ahead and open this article, and then lo
But
and
I
behold,
need to-
towards the bottom, there it was.
Is that the region where the myth started? Is it?
Yeah, Colorado.
Oh,
The Rocky
okay, so
Mountains.
perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah, there it is. Wow.
Yeah. So, and of course, here in
Mystery
California, we have
solved.
the chipalope instead.
We do?
Which is
chipmunk?
yes, but that is, I do not believe there's any chipmunks running around with papillomavirus. I think that is just for fun because jackalopes, therefore chipalopes. It's,
Just
whatever.
a
Go to
joke.
Confusion Hill, check it out.
I think I just found the jackalope walrus. It's a
Yikes.
jackalus. it's got big fangs. Anyway,
Yikes. Big, sharp, pointy teeth.
isn't it amazing what like just a different set of instructions will do? Like this is
Yes.
taking keratin, right? Your skin fiber, and basically saying grow horns, grow fingernails, like out of these different parts of your skin. It's taking
Yikes.
keratin and enforcing a different program, and it's overwriting the program that's in those cells that are infected by the virus and causing a totally different growth. I think that in itself is just fascinating, but I am fascinated by very weird things. So
my last story of the night, I wanted to bring you something that was perhaps the sweetest story I've seen in a very, very long time. And it is all about hugs.
I'm going to withhold my aw because I always feel like
Yeah.
it's a setup.
No, this is really just very, very sweet. Did you know that bats like to hug each other and cuddle and share meals?
Aw.
Yeah, there you go. In particular, this is the world's largest carnivorous bat. It's a spectral bat, Vimiprum spectrum. And they were previously assumed to be solitary foragers. You can guess where this is going. They are, like I said, they're the world's largest carnivorous bat. Their wingspan is about 3 feet, aka a meter. Thanks, guys. And researchers installed motion-sensitive infrared cameras inside a hollow tree in Costa Rica, where they're from, to see what they were up to. After 3 months of filming, they found that they were way more sociable than they previously thought. So my first question is to the ether, why do we think that? Why'd we think that? Why'd we think they were solitary? And how could we be so wrong? They actually found 8 main types of behaviors, including social interactions, food provision, and play. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about each of those. Within the roost, one of the social interactions they had is they would groom each other and make social vocalizations. They would have a greeting. Yes, They had a greeting similar to a hug, which there's a diagram of in this paper, which is very funny. Diagramming a hug. It's perfect. Where one bat would, they're feeding each other. Keep going.
Oh, co-feeding.
There it is. That's the diagram of a hug, in case you were
I
curious,
see.
on the top.
Top row A has 2 bats approaching each other, 2 bats getting even closer, and then 1 bat enveloping the other with its wings.
Yeah, so
Aw.
specifically, you see there's one bat that's like hanging and one bat flies in from outside. We'll call that like bat B, flies in from the outside. And so they hang kind of near bat A, and then bat A shimmies over and envelops bat V after they returned from being out. Bat
It says,
B. That's
"Hi,
hard to
you've
say.
been outside. I'm gonna give
Yeah.
you a hug and
Yeah,
get you
welcome
warm. Welcome back, and then maybe you'll vomit in my mouth."
Yes. So that's actually not the vomiting, but the sharing of food is part of this. That's more the vampire bat thing, is the vomiting.
Oh, yeah, the regurgitation.
They're sharing food is part of this, though. So they found some adult bats. I'm really having trouble talking today. They had adult bats return to the roost, and they were voluntarily transferring the food to younger bats. So maybe they're trying to transfer them off of milk. Maybe they're just being generous because youngins aren't as good at hunting. Who knows? They also found bats leaving the roost together, which, again, why did you think they were solitary? My initial thought is like, oh, they must go and hunt alone. And so they've only ever seen them out in the world alone. And so they're solitary animals. And then we go in the roost and they're like, oh no, they're hanging out. But no, if they leave together and they hunt together, then why did we think this, right? They also found prey transfer from an adult male to a lactating female. So they're like, oh, hey, you're working hard in here. Didn't have time to go hunt because you're feeding our baby. Let me help you out. Yes. And also showing some cooperative care and feeding for the baby. So this is pretty rare among mammals to see both parents caring for young. And so they seem to do that as well. And then they also, this is my favorite one, they'll make a cuddle ball when they fall asleep. So a large group of bats, it could be just a family unit of 4, or it could be more. They wrap one wing around their nearest neighbor and then huddle in. So they have this cute little, like, almost pinwheel style cuddle. And then they have all their snouts touching each other.
Oh my goodness.
That is adorable. For 3 foot long bats. No.
Yeah, 3 foot long wingspan. So their bodies probably, if I had to guess, maybe even a foot.
Yeah.
Probably.
So not as big as a fruit bat, but big.
No, but they're not carnivorous. So these guys are the largest carnivorous bat. The fruit bats are the largest bat.
Yeah. But these bats are not any slouches. These are big bats, especially, we've got Pipistrellus and like some of the others that are just the little tiny ones that people are worried about getting in their hair. This is
Yeah, so this 3 months of data, they found 8 types of behaviors in all these different categories. And then at the very end of this, kind of interview with the lead researcher, her name is Marisa Teague. Teague is the best I'm going to do there.
T-I-E-T-G-E.
It's very German. Or maybe, yeah, you're right. Maybe it's Russian. I don't know. Anyway, point being,
yes,
throws in at the end of this article here as an anecdote that she was also astonished to find that the bats seemed to recognize her after a few consecutive weeks of visiting. She was greeted with threat-like calls. Originally, bats broke from their roosting formation to hide in corners, but after she had started attending regularly to this one roost, they would just kind of look around, see her, not vocalize, remain exactly where they were, and relaxed. And so even after she spent 9 months away and then came back, they appeared to recognize her immediately. So
wow,
this is just an a throwaway comment that was not part of her research. Yeah. That honestly, here's another piece of research for you to do. Get to it. Go do a postdoc, I guess. I don't know. But these bats that are so social, it seems like they might be able to extend that kind of social intelligence onto humans in their space as well, which is really cool.
That's amazing. At least to understand non-threat, right? That this is, this not bat isn't coming in and attacking us. They're just here, and so that's fine. It's the social awareness of the environment and other individuals and other species. It's connectedness to that ecosystem, the habitat.
Yeah.
but social.
But can I?
They're gonna be like bat cockatoo. Next thing we know, they're gonna be hugging each other and getting into garbage cans.
Perfect.
Blair, you've worked in the zoos
Yes, I have.
and in the aquariums.
Yes.
I don't suspect it from fish, although I've heard that it's also true in some fish. But can you think of an animal that like doesn't recognize the zookeeper that normally tends to them? Like, are there animals that just like don't recognize people? Because I hear
I'm
this
gonna
every
tell
once in a
you
while.
why.
It's like,
That's really hard. That's really hard to say for a couple reasons. There's a lot of confounding variables. Like there was a famous story about a vulture who couldn't stand this one woman who was his zookeeper, and this same vulture was obsessed with her husband, who was a zookeeper. Okay, and very tragically, the husband died. And in the wife's grief, she started wearing some of his clothes because it smelled like him. Okay. And she went to work and the vulture loved her all of a sudden. Okay. So in that case, in this case, they were like, oh, they know their zookeeper. Nope. Used to a smell. In one situation, I cared for an animal, thought that they definitely knew who I was. Somebody else borrowed my keys. Those keys jingled in the very specific way that my keys jingled, came running, right? So there are other things, yes, that are signaling it. And with animals like reptiles and amphibians, I like to think they know and they are comfortable with individuals, but it could also be that I am comfortable working with that particular animal. My hands are steadier, my heartbeat is slower, I am not exuding any kind of like hormones like cortisol or anything like that, and those could be cues that they could be picking up on, right? So really difficult to say what is just all animals across the board recognizing threats and non-threats, and what is like, what about that is what they're recognizing? Are they recognizing an individual human, or are they recognizing certain kind of cues or variables that couple a non-threatening situation? Right. So it's super duper complicated. Yeah.
yeah, no. Now that you're framing it that way, I see how there's everything would be confounding. Like you'd have to have a very specific type of experiment to try to suss that out.
But that being said, all the animals I cared for loved me, of course.
Of course they did. Of course they did. Because they heard your jingle jangle keys and they knew they were about to get fed. That's why they came running. Now we know. You basically were running the can opener and had the cat show up.
But it's also that they come running, but then do they behave differently once they see that the keys are held by somebody different, right? Is that, what's the behavior post the first signal? Because, if somebody borrows my car and my cat's here, my cat hears, the squeaky brakes in my car outside come into the driveway, the cat's going to come to the front door to look for me, but maybe I'm home in the basement,
Right.
But they're coming to the sound of the squeaky brake tires. Yeah.
And if you had cat treats, would they care?
Would they care?
Anyone
I don't know. With the cat treats. It's like that one, gosh, was it a movie character or was this real? Because it's terrible. No, I think it's like a real person. No, training a child, like by giving them, oh no, this was Stalin. Yes. A real person. Stalin used to love manipulating people, and spent like some time at a country house with one of this, a fancy elite person, and their wife, the family had a little daughter, and every day for a week he gave the little girl little candy treats, and then at the end of the week, had a bet with the mother, that who the daughter would come to when they called her. The little girl went to Stalin as opposed to their mother.
And then he took her away, never to be seen again.
No candy for you this time, little girl.
Oh my goodness gracious.
Yeah. History lessons on science podcasts. There we go. For a
Mm.
minute, I was like, "What do I remember this story from?"
Well, that's also in As Good as It Gets about a dog and
Yeah,
bacon.
kids
So,
know better
anyway.
than dogs. Ah,
Fair enough. Yeah, well, that's all I got for the animal corner this week.
awesome. Thank you, Blair.
Mm-hmm.
Justin, what do you have to talk about this week?
This is a mystery skull.
I
Dun,
like
dun,
mystery.
dun.
Is this like Dragon Man?
Well, this one's a little bit more recent, a lot more recent than Dragon Man. This is a cave in Greece. Petralona Cave has been perplexing researchers ever since a skull was found there in 1960. So sometimes you can figure out in a layer of earth, you can kind of date back how far back that was, and sort of know at your sight what sort of age range you are looking at based on different features and known time points in soil. This is in a cave, and it was discovered cemented to a wall, so it didn't have anything covering it. And in a cave is a kind of a weird environment because while it can preserve things and protect things, you also don't have the same kind of sedimentary layers and things like that going on that are going to give you a date range. So essentially, the date on this skull was somewhere between, the life of what they think the cave, the functional life of the cave, just about. It was about 170 to 700,000 years was the range for this skull. And it's an interesting skull because it's definitely human or homogeneous, but it's not a current modern human. It's much more primitive than a current modern human should look like. And it's not a Neanderthal. So what is it? Well, they got this, this skull, and so, but they don't even know where it fits in. Is this like this could be, if it's 700,000 years at the outset of the old time frame? My gosh, I guess it could be even an early Neanderthal, possibly. Maybe it was an even early human ancestor, possibly. But if it's 170,000 years, then it's just a completely different hominin. It's another human that we have to name that was wandering around the planet, and this time in Greece. So they went, but now this time they have found a way to use new U-series dating. U-series or U-line, which we've talked about a few times, is going to take advantage of the calcite, these little crusty formations on the skull, presumably from when it was attached to the cave wall. And by looking at the uranium to thorium ratio at the level closest to the skull, they can actually date when it was formed. So the way that system works is you have natural uranium. It's just in the environment. It rains and, whatever, you get uranium just sort of drifts and covers soil. Now, if you went and tried to look at the uranium to thorium ratio in the dirt, just to see how old the dirt was, you'd have no luck. You couldn't tell what thorium came from what uranium, and so you don't have the start date. When it goes from uranium to thorium, it's tick-tock atomic clock style. It's a half-life that we can actually pinpoint the speed at which that process takes place. But when you got all kinds of different uranium deposits from different starting time points and different thorium amount, you can't figure out the ratio. But what's interesting is just the happenstance is that uranium is water soluble. So when it rains and the moisture moves down through the soil, and that moisture finds its way into a cave, runs down a cave wall, it brings with it all these little trace minerals, including the uranium isotopes, but no thorium. The thorium is not water soluble. It stays behind. It's stuck in the soil up above. So what happens then is this little drip comes down the cave wall. It evaporates, leaving the trace minerals stuck to it. And you have uranium that's all by itself, no thorium, and it begins to convert to thorium. And you look at that you look at that ratio of how much thorium there is to how much uranium is present, and you can tell exactly when that process started, more or less. Okay, atomic clock, we're very precise.
Yeah.
So what happened? We've dated previously some cave art, right? There was famously a couple of caves in Spain where they used this technology and found that the cave paintings had to be much older. They were older than 65,000 years, and were probably Neanderthal made, not current modern human, right? Because they were just too old. So it doesn't tell you how old. It doesn't date the thing. It can only tell you the minimal starting point. So that skull, they determined through looking at the U series dating, is around 286,000 years old. That would be the minimum old date, right?
Yeah.
Because it could have been in the cave and not getting any moisture on it. It could have been covered in the cave. It could have been just on the dry side of the cave. Who knows? But once that calcite material started to form on it, they can tell by looking at that layer closest, the thorium to uranium ratio closest to the skull. They can tell right when that started, 286,000 years. Okay. But it doesn't give you the other date. It doesn't say how, what's the oldest it could have been placed in there.
Huh.
It's the minimum oldest, but not the oldest. If that makes any sense.
Right. So there's not like full bounds on the age. It's like it could be this, but it could be much older. We just don't know how. Yeah.
But
okay.
The floor of the cave also has these deposits. And if you got a stalagmite veil that's on one of the walls, they can test that. And so they do these tests, and they have age ranges that are, depending on where they're looking, no more than 539,000. But if it was stuck to the wall, if it wasn't actually stuck to the wall, because there's a little bit of mystery about whether it was completely stuck to the wall or was just leaning against the wall when it was first found in 1960.
Mm-hmm.
If it was just on the floor, it could be an oldest date of 410,000 years. If it's attached to the wall, it could be as old as 539,000. So that's the range. If it's the initial report that says it was attached to the wall, if we go with that, we now have about 286,000 to around 539,000 years old. That's the age range. Much more likely to be near the 300,000 mark. Much more likely that it's pretty close to when the residue started forming. And that's interesting because that's going to overlap with Neanderthal presence. So
so we don't know who the skull is, but it's not Neanderthal. It's some kind of hominid, but it's not like we can't say which hominid it is.
If it was 700,000 years ago, it was like the oldest possible old analysis of the date.
Mm-hmm.
It could have been a contemporary of the earliest Neanderthals, which means it may have been some sort of a sister species, or may have been a divergent kind of a thing. Like, we don't know. Right? But that's around the time that Neanderthals are thought to have started, around 700,000 to 800,000 years ago. The fact that this thing is in the 280-something thousand to 300,000 years, well, we're getting into the range where Neanderthals were getting pretty well spread out across Europe even. This is well after the older hominins that were like 1 million years ago that were running around Europe had died off. So this is kind of a new mystery. We find it on this, they're in Greece, sort of in the nexus of kind of close to Africa. If you swam for it, I guess.
Yeah.
Looking more primitive than a current modern human would have 280 something, 300,000 years ago, and definitely not a sister origin of Neanderthal, but a contemporary, something that was wandering around at the same time. So what do we need? We need more skulls. We gotta find more evidence of this.
Find more skulls, everyone. They don't even know how the skull got into this particular cave. It's just one skull. That's it. No.
That's all they got. But it's
One
an intact
skull.
cranium. I mean, that's the nice thing. It's not just a fragment of a thing. It's
Oh, it was the
Then-
Greek gods. They threw someone down in a pit, and that just the head. Just throw
It sounds like they got lost. Poor bugger.
Oh,
spelunking
knows?
Yeah, exactly.
without gear is just risky. It just is.
Good gracious.
And my last story of the night is going to be from Stanford Medicine. Scientists investigating a neurological underpinning of autism spectrum disorder. They have narrowed it down to hyperactivity, not the entire disorder, but they have found that hyperactivity in a specific brain region could drive behaviors commonly associated with the disorder. So they did all of this research with a mouse model. They identified and you're going to have to help me out, Kiki, because this is one of those brain words that for some reason my brain doesn't know, which it seems like it should because it's a brain region. Like it would be like knowing the streets in your hometown. I should know all of these. But the researchers identified the reticular thalamic nucleus, something that serves apparently as gatekeeper for sensory information between the thalamus and cortex as a potential target for treatment. They were able to reverse symptoms similar to those of autism, including susceptibility to seizures, heightened sensitivity to stimulus, and increased motor activity, as well as repetitive behaviors and decreased social actions by giving the mice drugs that suppressed that specific area of the brain. The same drugs are currently being studied for treatment of epilepsy. So this is maybe where the process underlying autism spectrum disorder and epilepsy kind of overlap in the brain. There's a lot of that overlap in diagnosis with people who have autism also having epilepsy, or is it the other way around? Kind of hard to tell. But I mean, it's not saying it's going to reverse autism, but that's quite of an extensive list of the things that are identified as being autism that it would be putting some controls on in mice. This is still early, and it's an off target again because this was being designed as the epilepsy drug.
However, they found that it was impacting these behaviors more generally. And so they're like, hey, what happens if we look at it in autism, in autistic model mice, right?
Yep.
These aren't necessarily autistic mice because that's a human thing, but they're mice that are a model for autism.
Yeah, it says, the population of autism is...
Of autistic mice. No.
Well, it epilepsy is much more prevalent, and I had no idea. Epilepsy is much more prevalent in people with autism than the general population. Numbers around 30%.
Really?
Compared to about 1% in the general population.
That is that's very interesting. So there's that massive overlap that is, it's not necessarily treating the epilepsy only.
Right. And so, and also that region sounds like it's connected to a lot of the other symptoms that autism manifests.
Yeah.
Not that it's causal, but it seems like this interface of sensory information, communication in the brain, that in the extreme case, it seems, the extreme malfunctioning would be it delves into epilepsy. But all of these nuanced behavioral traits may also be arising from this communication point in the brain.
Mm-hmm. That's cool. This is the kind of thing that you wonder how it or if it is translatable to humans. Like if the complexity of the system is similarly complex, or if this is where the complexity just like where they branch off in too many distinct directions for this kind of treatment to map over to
Could
people.
be. But
Yeah.
if we have a reticular thalamic nucleus,
We do.
then and it's probably set up about the same way. That sounds like one of those old streets in the brain town where it's been there
Yeah,
for a
totally.
long time. And you know, we have a lot of one of the reasons we use mice and sometimes rabbits in studies is they kind of split off from us at around the same time that, you know, that primates split off from everything else. Like we're kind of down we're down a similar evolutionary path, more so than, you know, a lot of overlap that we would have with other creatures. So I don't know. I think we probably got plenty of brain region equipment that hasn't needed updating or changing over the years.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Studies like this always I struggle with, because when you talk about symptoms similar to those of autism, so it's
not the
how
same.
do you yes, but also how do you uncouple the parts of the autism spectrum that someone inhabits, let's say, right, that makes them
Yeah.
versus things that are symptoms that you'd like to alleviate, right? And how are those things coupled, and how much is that going to fundamentally alter that person's personality, right? Like there are people who are actually really proud of their autism. There are people who see that as part of themselves. A lot of people now, right? Like it's a lot less of a stigma to be on the autism spectrum now. Of course, there are people that are very far on that spectrum, and there are kind of barriers to them doing things that they might wish to do, right? And so it would be good to be able to lessen, inhibit, alleviate, whatever words you want to use, like those elements of symptoms that come from their autism, right? But like,
but okay.
There is this piece where I'm like, how much of somebody's autism is like, how much is that of that is them? You know what I mean?
Here's the answer. I got it.
You got it. Okay.
Would you take a pill that makes you autistic?
No. But
I feel like I need more information. Yeah.
Right. So
like, would I take a pill that would make me autistic if it made my migraines go away? Maybe. Like,
so I might take it. You know, see what it's like. Oh, this is kind of what it's like. Oh gosh, oh my gosh, I didn't hear those sounds before, and now they kind of bother me, and they didn't before. That's really strange.
Right.
This is a drug. This isn't. This wouldn't be a severing and rewiring of brain net. This is a drug you could take and try it.
Of course. No,
and
totally. I'm not saying this isn't something we should follow. I'm just saying, as this field,
get me off of it, or
as this field like is explored, I'm curious about that piece. That's all I'm saying, right? Like, if the people who are in the clinical trials are like, I didn't like this, I didn't feel like myself, right? Or the people around them say, I don't recognize this person, you know, like those are the things that I'm really curious about. I also think it's really important to have that fundamentally figured out before you start looking at this in children. Because I also know that there is, you know, in society, there's this push to make kids like act normal, which what is normal, right? There's nothing. And so
just whatever gets along with society.
Yeah, exactly. And I really hesitate to do something, even if it is something that you could just stop taking the drug, right? If you do it at a time when somebody is forming as a human, that can also fundamentally change the trajectory of their lives, right?
Oh,
So I'm just saying there's like a
maybe
lot
not.
going on here.
Like, yeah, I mean, like I think being able to have the drug available so you could take the perspective. You know, I mean, some people, like, if you're doing perfectly good self-care and everything's fine, you might not even be curious about trying. But you know, like I'm sure there are novel writers of old and poets who tried an antidepressive medication and were like, "Oh, nope, nope, I can't write, or an anti-anxiety medicine, and then like what, like there's going to be people who function better because they grew up with their neurodiversity of whatever type.
Mm-hmm.
But
Absolutely,
like you said,
yeah.
there are individuals who are potentially very, very far on the spectrum, and there for families, some kind of a treatment that would alleviate the symptoms and control the reticular thalamic nucleus, and actually make allow kids to be more social, to allow them to interact with their families more, allow them
Mhm.
to maybe not experience extreme stimulus discomfort that leads to neural storms and anxiety attacks and temper tantrums that can sometimes be incredibly violent.
And while
You know,
those may form who you are,
for families, there could be
you might want to avoid
better
it.
choices.
Oh, for sure.
better
Yeah.
options.
No, in no way am I trying to say this is like a bad idea, right? I'm just saying that I do think that's a piece of this that you can't look at it in mice. You can't look at it in a mouse model, right? But that's something when you start a human trial on a treatment like this, that's a piece I would be interested to kind of see the result of.
There's
right?
a long
And
way
I had the
before this
same
makes
thought,
it to
like-
people, though.
like there's like people I know who like are, you know, would you could be a dramatically different personality.
Yeah.
And you're right, like if you're talking about late in life and they've already formed relationships and things, and you know, oh my gosh, an autistic couple, if one took it and the other didn't, and oh my goodness, what could, like, there's all kinds of drama available.
Yeah.
But this
Anyway.
also, this particular study, though, is genetic modification, right? So it could potentially lead to genetic modification and then designer drugs. So that there's like very specific activation of the reticular thalamic nucleus, right? The question is, how do you specifically get to stimulating only the reticular thalamic nucleus in a human brain? You know, something that's easy to do in a mouse because you can electrode it, or you can, it's easy to do knockout mice, or, relatively easy anyway. But the suppression of that overactivity in mice is a different story than it is in a human being. So this is a long way from happening. But I think it's worth talking about, though, right? There are people who are who lack the ability to hear or lack sight, and they're in communities and where people want to bring back hearing or bring back sight. There are people in these communities who say, no, I'm not disabled. I'm differently abled, and I do not want it to be fixed. I like myself the way it is. And so this is, that choice is very important. And so that's, I think it's important to bring up for all these technologies, that especially when it's with kids, right? When is it good? Speaking of babies, I have a baby story. And Justin, it's microbes as well. So it's a story bringing together the world of microbes and baby brains. We've talked about the question of whether or not microbes are beneficial, whether, natural birth or C-section impacts the health of babies and their development, often talking about their immune systems and how well they're able to fight off various diseases, or what that acquired microbiome from natural childbirth versus one that is acquired later just in the environment after C-section, how that impacts their health. this particular study is interesting in that it was published in Hormones and Behavior a couple of weeks back. And the researchers, they weren't looking at people. Again, this is mice. So we're doing wonderful work in the world of understanding mice and helping their newborns and their offspring develop appropriately. But the researchers took germ-free mothers and non-germ-free mothers. So these are sterile mice that are in a completely sterile environment. They have no microbes on them. They are not in a place that has microbes. There's no microbes that the researchers, it's like, a clean room for these mice. Their womb is a clean room. There's no microbes anywhere, right? And then they had mice in a normal situation, and they cross-fostered different pups, and they looked at the offspring of the sterile mice versus normal mice, the germ-free versus with germs, and looked at the brains of the pups, and they looked to see how many neurons were in a certain part of the brain that is called the hypothalamic paraventricular nucleus. And this HPN, the hypothalamic paraventricular nucleus, it's the paraventricular nucleus. So PVN is the acronym that they're using. This paraventricular nucleus is really important at like a basal level for a lot of biological or physiological mechanisms, and also for also social activities. So it's like at the hypothalamus, this is a very essential area of the brain. And what they discovered is that there was a decrease in the number of neurons in the brains, in this area of the brain, the paraventricular nucleus, in the germ-free baby mice. And this is coming from the mothers who were germ-free as well. So when they cross-fostered and that's basically taking germy babies and giving them to germ-free moms, and then taking germ-free babies and giving them to germy moms. The germ-free babies, they're born with the lower number of neurons. Their neurons increase a bit, but they never reach the same number of neurons as those that are fully born from, in, and develop in germed environments. So the interesting question here, and what they're bringing up, is that it's not just the birth canal microbes that are important. It's actually the microbiota of the mother themselves. So during gestation, the microbiota of the mom impact the development of the brain of the offspring. The birth and the microbes that are acquired during birth also impact the development of the brain of the offspring, and development itself is part of the picture. And they did experiments with adults as well, swapping them over. And they found that if you take germs away at any point, this paraventricular nucleus is impacted, but it's just impacted to different degrees at different times, depending. But if the microbes are not there with the mom pre-birth, there's a deficit starting immediately.
So
microbes impact brain development. There we go.
Yeah.
That's the bottom line.
When I was when I was doing research on the like smear or not to smear, right? Mm-hmm. The whole idea is, if you have an emergency C-section,
do you wipe?
Yeah, do you do a smear? And a lot of hospitals don't even ask you if you want to do it or not. It's like, anyway, there's not a lot of research on smear or not to smear, which is why a lot of hospitals don't kind of have that in their menu of options. But most of the research that I did read, the limited research that was available, was around just developing the microbiome. It wasn't in the connection to the brain. That is not, it's just about gut. It was about gut health pretty much only.
Yeah.
And that research there's not a lot. And that's because there's so many other places that you get your gut micro.
But as you start, you start breastfeeding or like whatever's on, if you don't have a completely sterile bottle nipple, right? So
what's on your skin? You're doing skin to skin all the time. Right. Do you have a dog in the house that licks your baby's foot and then they stick their foot in their mouth? Like there's all these different places, that they're getting microbes from, aside from this one entry point.
But it's so the thing is that there's that one, and so this is beyond just the gut or the immune system. This is the brain and neurons in the brain. And what I find really interesting about the PVN is that, so this is like physiological mechanisms. So stress, right? Blood pressure, your osmotic water balance, whether you're bloated or not, or dehydrated or whatever. But the social behavior is one of the really important things here too. But in terms of regulating stress and things like blood pressure, there have been a number of studies that suggest that there are that the neurons coming into the gut influence the immune system in the gut, and there is this feedback loop between the microbes in the gut, the immune system, and the nervous system. This is also taking place in the lungs as well. The vagus nerve is impacts how you recover from the flu. Like if you get rid of your vagal nerve input to your lungs, you won't be breathing. But anyway, if you get rid of the vagal nerve input, there are nociceptors. There are these receptors from the vagus nerve in the lungs that respond to inflammation and macrophages and all sorts of stuff. And if you get rid of them, the immune system goes crazy, and then the immune system goes too far. And so the nervous system is balancing the immune system, and this is all attached to the brain, to stress and the immune system. We know they go together. I mean, I am jumping to conclusions here, but the link between the microbes, the brain development in an area that is responsible for helping to regulate stress and social behavior.
It's also lined with neuronal tissue.
Yeah. Yes. Exactly.
Like that's that gut-brain connection is two neurons that are throughout your digestive system. So it makes sense that it would still be what the studies were showing about the difference in the gut microbiome is probably where is sourcing the contribution to the brain development. No doubt.
Yeah.
That would be very logical.
Yeah.
Anyway. One thing I missed from the study, though, how did the German babies,
germy
babies, do with the germ-free upbringing?
It diminished. Affected? Yeah, so it did diminish the number of the PVN neurons. So
it's got to be germy all the way around.
Yeah, they had more neurons still than the ones that were born in the germ-free, but it decreased the number because they were in a germ-free environment after. Okay. So there is a continued interplay during development between the environment, the microbes, and our brain development. This is in mice, but I think it's really the next step. Now we have to measure it. You're going to have to cut up some. No, never mind. Don't listen to me. I'm not
mad scientist Kiki over here.
That's right.
I just hope the research mice are still getting funded, because they seem to be doing all the work.
The money. Yeah. Well, if they're not funding the research mice, maybe they're funding the research robots. Some new research out of China, which is a little concerning to me. I don't know if you guys are going to feel the same way, but this paper published in Cell this last week, researchers are genetically modifying like tomatoes and soybeans and other crops that could be hothouse farmed or greenhouse farmed, to make them more easily pollinated by robots. So the what they are doing is genetically modifying. So we know that through evolution, through adaptation, many flowers have adapted to specific pollinators, and pollinators have adapted in turn. So like the honey creepers of Hawaii are an example that as their flowers are going extinct because of human land use and development and climate change, the honey creeper birds that have specialized on very specific flowers aren't able to find those flowers or access food anymore because maybe their curved beak is too short to get to the bottom of a long flower. And so the birds are dying. Oh no, where are all the pollinators going? It's okay. We're going to put all of our plants into hothouses and pollinate them with robots now. Because robots are less expensive than people, because it's really expensive apparently to do hybridization and to hand pollinate tomato crops and also like soybeans and others. There are large proportions of, the costs that go to actually paying people to do pollination by hand. So instead, let's just genetically modify the flowers so that robots can do it in a hothouse really efficiently and fast. And that's what they're doing.
Great.
So anyway, I might have glossed over specifics of this study, but this is the big take home of what they're doing. They're making specific flower designs so that the parts of the flower that are necessary for pollination are easily accessible by robot parts. And
so if that's the only thing,
just bringing it up.
Great. If that's the only thing that they've changed, if that's the only modification, then, and nobody will like this, my one requirement is that they also set those plants out into the wild.
But see, that's, what? Right. No.
Because then because what you're talking about doing is if you flash forward to this becomes agriculture, right? Say this is as good an idea as everybody who's engineering it thinks it is, and it replaces pollinators, which is, the fear of colony collapse creating a global famine is real. I think you would need to, a third of humans would be required to run around pollinating, because we can't pollinate as efficiently as a bee.
No, you can't.
A third of humans would be pollinating as a job full time. Like it would be ridiculous. Okay, but so
what a wonderfully calming job. I think of any job that could be great.
The next 100 years, quotas, we create monocultures that all pollinate by these robots.
But this is my question, Kiki.
I would expect that we should have an allowance for an actual pollinator out in the wild to take advantage, to evolve with or away from this, however they see fit, out in the wild while we're doing this experiment of humanity.
There are pros and cons to changing these traits of flowers, right? There's, these are very energetic parts of the flowers, and if they get eaten by, if they get out in the wild, very often flowers are like, I'm preserving this part just for the pollinators, and they don't want it to get eaten by a deer or whatever. Blair, what?
I have a question.
Okay.
Why are we engineering the plants to be pollinatable by the robots instead of the robots to be the right shape for the plants?
Right? This is a really great question.
Oh, it's worse than you think.
Because many crop traits obstruct the application of AI-based robots. Oh, yeah.
Then design a new robot. Yeah. Design a new robot. That seems easier than creating a dead end.
No, it's to prevent my plan. It's to make it harder to pollinate, so that if it goes out into the
Yes.
wild and you don't have the right robot, you didn't buy the right robot, you can't pollinate their plant. You can't
Yes,
produce it
it's the
yourself.
same like when Monsanto was making the
Exactly.
corn that wouldn't, yes, and then
Exactly.
it escaped, and then everybody
It's
sued
to
them, and
create
it was, yes.
a proprietary plant.
And what they have created here in this
No.
particular study are sterile male lines with flowers with exserted
Dang word.
stigmas, and then they trained a mobile robot to automatically recognize and cross-pollinate the stigmas. And so they have automated F1 breeding that's efficient, comparable to manual pollination, facilitating the rapid breeding of stress-resilient and flavorful tomatoes when combined with de novo domestication under speed breeding conditions.
Yeah, this should not be allowed.
Well,
You can
now
have
they got me
robots.
back.
You can have robots that pollinate. That is, I don't have any problem with that.
Yeah.
But this should not be allowed.
Imagine hothouses like Amazon factories manned by robots.
Beautiful.
Tomatoes?
And in
Are
the
they good?
future, where they're flavorful, apparently.
Then fine. Tomatoes not a real thing anyway. That's a human manipulated,
The
genetically
tomato?
modified.
Soybeans are another one of the crops that
Tomatoes were
working on.
basically berries before the Chilean
Well-
or Peruvians got a hold of them. They were
Anyway.
tiny little.
Yeah, right.
Anyway,
Yes, you're right.
They're-
But then, yeah.
they're working on
It's already
automating.
modified through breeding over 10,000 years or whatever. But yeah, it's
Yeah.
already robot controlled. That's fine.
They've been
Nothing there.
looking at doing robots for
No wonder what the
strawberry
tomato
picking and
caterpillars
all
were
sorts.
doing all that time.
I
What were
know.
they?
Exactly.
Sorry.
There's so many.
Waiting.
With the Cheshire cat waiting to see what to do. But anyway, yes, robots and genetic modification of plants so that, you got to make it easy for the AI bots to be able to pollinate things in the warehouses when all the humans are gone. When the humans are dead. Anyway, there is a brain-computer interface researchers at Stanford have been working on to decode and translate your inner thoughts. So if you think in words and have thoughts in your head that you do not speak aloud, but not planned speech. So you could be, I'm going to say, thinking of what you're going to, but there's the inner thoughts that are not pre-speech kind of things, right? And so they worked with their new brain computer interface that demonstrated 74% accuracy in translating inner speech.
Yeah.
It's
That's the end
probably
of
with a number
society.
like that, with the number of 74%, it's
It's
probably
not amazing
90. It's probably 90 because it's people who are like, that's not what I was thinking.
I won't tell you what I
Right.
was really thinking.
No, I wasn't wondering what that dirt tastes like. Like, it's just weird stuff like that they're like,
It's the end
I'm not
of-
copying to that.
Yeah.
It's the end of society. It would be basically like putting everybody on a truth detector, and then it would
Yeah,
be
that's
there
not
could be
good.
no negotiations, no
You just
between
you just
countries or
never
nations.
you don't want to know. You don't want to know what people are thinking. You don't.
Yeah, you really don't. Like even when they talk and they're saying the words, I don't really want to hear that part either most of the time, let alone the part that they didn't say. Like,
Yeah. So they were able to figure out the difference between attempted speech, whereas like people like, like real thinking about like, I'm going to go
Right.
and inner thoughts. And they said, while the signals were similar, they were able to tell the difference between them. So they were able to tell the difference between the things that people wanted to actually say or were going to say versus those inside thoughts that you never
okay, hang
say.
on. Where
And-
is this study?
Stanford
Yeah.
University and
Okay. Stanford, like they could have, and I'm not saying they did. That's a college with a lot of introverts. I'm just
Anyway,
saying that would
your
be
research-
be tough. If they can read an introvert, I would
Well,
be
what they were
well
like,
impressed.
what they
If they're
studied.
interpreting Italian fishermen, I
Okay,
don't
you're
feel like
going
it's
off.
as
You're
impressive.
going off here. You're going off here. And the study actually involved 4 people who were paralyzed. So severe paralysis from ALS or brainstem stroke. So these are people who cannot necessarily speak well. And so the idea is that by using these brain computer interfaces, they could help people who are not able to communicate easily actually be able to participate using a translated speech, right? But this is where we went immediately, is also where these
Yes.
where these studies are going. And so you know, the idea that eventually advanced devices would be able to either not just restore communication, but also be used in other instances is, to destroy civilization, of course.
Right, right.
To
The other
destroy
thing I'm wondering
society.
though,
Now
from
I'm
like a
going the other way.
brainy, from just a brain interest in how brains work perspective, is I'm wondering if, because this is what I was thinking of too, is people who've lost the ability to speak or have struggled with the ability to speak, right?
Yeah.
Would it be the same for people who have never been able to speak? Would it be the same pathways in their brain, right? Because if they were born without the ability to speak, then are they still using the same parts of their brain that people who lost the ability would, right? Probably
That's a
not.
great question. Yeah. So, but if it's an individualized brain-computer interface, potentially the neural signals could be trained. Once they've got kind of the system down, maybe they could be trained.
Right.
But I
guess my question is, are there 2 distinct pathways still if you have never spoken? Do you still have inner thoughts versus dialogue? Or is
would
it,
you even have dialogue, or would it just be images?
Right, because you'd still
But you
probably be
hear
like, oh, I want to convey this. I want to sign this. I want to write it down. I want to write, like, is there a similar pathway of I want to convey this information to somebody else versus I'm having an inner thought? It's still 2 unique pathways, I would assume. But I'm curious if this interface would be able to figure it out in the same way.
Now that I understand
probably
it a little
could.
bit better,
Yeah.
the setup, I'm going to take the under on that 74. I'm going to take like, I'd say something like that. That was pretty elegant, right? Like, yeah, that's what I meant. Yeah, sure. Yeah, well, that was pretty well said. I'll say I was going to say that. Of course, that was.
Of course.
If this is AI talking for people,
Yeah.
on some level, then it's just like, well, it's going to speak with confidence. And if you haven't been able to communicate and you're like, yeah, I did know that information that I just shared, apparently.
Yeah.
No, that's I don't know.
Yeah.
Now I'm more wary.
I think it's good to be wary. But they looked at different areas within the brain, within the gyrus, in primary motor cortex, and in looking at particular areas, they found most of the ones there was certain areas that were best for decoding inner speech. They found some areas that were better for attempted speech, and some areas were really good at listening. And so they were able to decode kind of what the brain was decoding as hearing, as listening to language, as opposed to actually attempting or the kind of inner speech of the brain. And then there were some areas that
the question, Blair.
Yeah.
You don't have to have the speech pathways if you got the hearing pathways and you're thinking in the sound.
Yeah.
Is that wild?
Yeah.
Would that work?
Yeah, and this is all basically in the auditory areas, and so, so if you don't think with sound, this might not work.
Interesting.
Yeah, but I think that's a really interesting question. And of course, they're using large language models to match these neural signals to words to try and put this whole system together. And I don't know. I think it's pretty interesting. Beyond that, I don't have much more for tonight, except that researchers published a study in PLOS One the end of July that we didn't talk about that I think everybody needs to know. Communicating astrobiology and the search for life elsewhere. So this study did a scientific analysis of media representation of the search for life in space. Basically, they found that there's rampant speculation and overselling of the science.
We could have told you that.
I know. So, hey, if you've been listening to TWIS for a day or 20 years or 25 years, you know this is the place to come where we speculate, but we always stick to the facts as far as we know them.
Mm-hmm.
Just so you know.
Also, I don't think
we try to counter some of that rampant speculation.
We tend not to be on that bandwagon too quickly.
No, I look at headlines, and if any time it's got Ari Loeb in a headline, I'm like, nope, no, just don't even listen. No.
We found a squirrel on Mars. JK, it's a rock.
Yeah, it's just gonna be a squirrel-like rock. It's not even like a squirrel. It's more like a rock. Mm-hmm. I don't know.
Laugh now, but the squirrels have been there for decades. They're way ahead of us.
If by squirrels you mean rocks, you're right. Yeah, they have been there.
They're not Martian squirrels. Don't be confused. Don't believe the hype.
Squirrels.
Those are Earth squirrels that made it there well ahead of us.
Oh, sure.
They have technology we haven't even dreamed of before. They got it all hidden in the trees.
But anyway,
they built a whole space elevator, and then it's just it rotted because it was made out of wood.
Doesn't work right. It's a little squirrely, I don't know. But it is amazing that a study. We have to. Do we need a study to tell us that the complex dynamics of science communication and astrobiology, where speculations and promises can generate public excitement and influence research funding, also risk misrepresenting science uncertainty and creating unrealistic expectations? Do we need a scientific study to tell us that about the way that some science is represented in the media? Do we?
That sounds like some scientists were really angry at science media, and they were like, "How do I tell them how mad I am? I know it's like the ultimate mic drop of I'll write them a letter. It's no. I'm gonna do a research paper. That's what I'm gonna do.
I'll show you wrong.
I'm gonna have a strongly worded piece of research. That's all. I'll tell them. See?
So like, is that like a big deal?
It's a big deal because of the internet. I feel like it's a big deal because it used to be like, oh, if you watch the 10 o'clock news, they'd say something in your kitchen may kill you. And you're like, yeah, 10 o'clock news. Okay, I'm sure it's bleach again. Got it. But then, now that we have the internet and we have social media and we have accessibility to this science news everywhere, it's not as easy to recognize what's real and what's fake, to recognize what's sensationalized and what's not, and people don't have the time to click on every single thing and go, is this real? Is this real? Is this real? They're just like, oh, I saw this article that like there's Frankenstein, there's zombie bunnies. Did you hear there's zombie bunnies in Colorado? And then they're like, oh man, really? And then they tell their friends, there's zombie bunnies in Colorado. And then it's so I do feel like it's a bigger problem than 20 years ago because of that. A lot of the same tactics are getting used to catch people's attention, but there's way more to lose.
Yeah. So as far as speculation, I was going to say, as far as speculation is happening in these studies, and the representation in different publications, research paper versus press release versus news articles. The news articles are always multiples of speculation higher than the research paper. The research papers do have significant speculation when it comes to existence or the conditions, because these are speculations. They're guessing. It's like probably in the conclusions, we are, guessing. And they probably say we're speculating that this could exist, and it's also the speculation as they lead into the next study that they're going to do, or the next paper that, the next hypothesis that they're generating. But the one thing that is very interesting is that when it comes to evidence, pretty much, they're all pretty much on par. They all pretty much stick to the evidence, except the news articles do go a little bit higher in the speculation on the evidence. And then the press releases,
don't the news articles usually,
if you think of like the importance of speculation, the press releases, which are usually coming from universities where the research, or institutions where the research is happening, they overestimate or speculate the most on significance of the study, more so than the news articles. Yeah, according to this analysis, related to astrobiology.
Here's a proper academic paper, though. Keep it very concise, keep it very limited, speculate maybe not at all, but just present what we've done. Now,
and then the press release goes, you need to, this is significant, because they want to get the news media's attention. And so they get big. And then the news media goes, oh, this is exciting. And then they speculate more about life on a planet that's Earth-like. What?
They conduct interviews with people who can say, oh, I had nothing to do with this research, but I think it means this.
Okay. Yes. Now, stop. Here's what I'm going to look at.
Now I'm a science writer, so I'm going to tell you things.
I'm looking at significance. Now, the research paper isn't going to be talking about the where it necessarily falls in the 10 other research papers that are come out, where it falls in terms of how this launches everything forward.
Usually, though, if they do, it's like, this is the first time this has been discovered. Like, this is possibly the first time anyone's described this. Right?
This might possibly lead to a pathway for it to be a first-time addition to an ad hoc. Like, it's very conservative to a good paper. If a paper is not being very conservative about its significance, other than like the data's significance, right?
You should run away.
Then there's probably a problem with it, right? Now, yes, then they have the hype people, but the hype people are also able to say, like, here's where it fits into the next drug that's coming out. Here's where it fits into 10 other diseases that this is in the realm of working on. And that might look like hype, but then look at the significance when you get to the press on that one. See how it's below? Because the regular press is like, I don't know why that's it.
It's not because they have a different
that they did.
And the significance is not necessarily the thing that gets eyeballs.
But it could also just be lost on them.
Yeah.
It's like part of the fun.
That's interesting, yeah.
Yeah. It just might be lost on them. And so there can be misunderstanding. I would say that I would go with looking at all of these, I would say I would roll with the press release in most of those cases. Most university press releases aren't doing too much poofery, really. They're not really like, it's not that bad. It's not like, I don't know. I think they're usually sticking pretty good to where it's at. They're not,
how many of the conversations we have in this show are about this exactly? It's a lot.
Press release, yeah.
No,
a lot of it is about, they're saying it means this, but really, like, why? It's, you know what I mean? So it's a lot of the conversations that we have.
From a university, I find usually stick pretty well to the study, but might explain its significance better and might get a little bit more excited about it. Now,
the press release is normally where like a lot of like framing occurs that everybody uses.
And then if you're reading a treatment or article on it, that's when you're like, Did you even read the press release when this was written? Like, how can this be so different?
So, Justin, you really like to bring those. I really like to bring the ones that say, oh, you think that this bird is dancing? How about they're doing body language, right?
Yeah.
So I think that there's kind of two different types of that. Like, you do a lot of the medical stories where they try to extrapolate in these crazy ways that you're describing. I think I bring a lot of stories that where the press release is the one where they have an interview with usually the lead researcher, if not, some grad students and some other things. They have an interview with sometimes an unrelated professor from another institution entirely, right? But that's where a lot of the kind of editorializing from people close to the story come in. And I think that's where I run into a lot of trouble when I am kind of interpreting a story that I don't fully agree with. It's actually in the press release. So I think there's different categories, right? And that's why there's the data spread exists, because it's kind of a deterioration from the original source material in each step. It's a game of telephone, ultimately.
Doesn't always cover everything. And that was where I was coming from.
We need to use convolution. So we go from the news stories back to the original lab research that was done.
And then I've seen studies where you're like, how are you presenting this data in words one way, but then you're giving me numbers that say the opposite, right?
Or you say it's this fundamentally amazing study and it had 2 people in it or something, right? Yeah.
Which, I mean, depending on, if it's an end of life thing, like a lot of the medical stuff, the really cutting edge treatments, you're going to find that first time you're going to hear about it, it's going to be one person, because that person might die. And they're not going to do 30 people if they all might die. But it must be important enough to try it. That person might die.
Yeah.
It's tough.
Anyway, but this was just astrobiology, looking at the speculation. And who knew? There's a lot of speculation in the media about science related to astrobiology.
And that's going to sell. That will sell, right? Yeah. And you don't start off, you got to hike that a little bit, because you don't want to start off with like, what is it like to be an astronaut? Well, the first thing I'm going to tell you is that you drink recycled urine. Oh, you know what? I'm going to go look at a different,
and
be
the
a
air
car
is really
salesman
dry
instead of an astronaut, something there. You don't have to drink my own pee.
Okay.
But if we can try to bring this like full circle to how we started tonight, there has to be a certain amount of interpretation and maybe sensationalization to get funding, to get support from political allies, right? But also, to like, how do you indicate NASA's important? If you just talk about Doppler for weather so that you can like decide when to pour concrete, that's not as sensational as talking about mapping the stars, right?
Or
so
I
think that
barreling down on your hometown, right?
Right, exactly. So there is a piece of this that you have to do to make science interesting and valuable and cutting edge, which is what some people want to see from their science, right? And so where you or I might sit here and be like, oh my God, they thought XYZ, but it's actually ABC. Like, this is so cool. Like, somebody else could look at it and be like, why do I care?
Why?
Right? And so there is a job to do in communicating science to make it exciting, to make it thrilling, to make it groundbreaking.
As many people as possible. Yeah.
Yeah. To make sure people value science, understand science, and continue to support it. So like, I understand why a certain amount of this needs to happen, but it can't happen at the detriment of truth, right? And I think that that's where we often get so frustrated.
Yep. I get frustrated. Yeah. To the detriment of truth. I think that is where it when it breaks down.
I think we're too critical, though. I've seen what else is out there.
I'm worse. A very critical person.
It just gets worse the further away we go.
I know. I can only deal with
the worst of this overhyping of a science story is far more accurate.
It's
I'm
funny
gonna
because I feel
I'm
like
gonna
the places
overhype
that
the overhyped story.
yeah, yeah. The places that we get our sources from usually is kind of a recent release. The paper came out very recently, but so we get I feel like the place that I get stories from, usually the few sites that I go to, um, it's fairly unadulterated still. It's close to the original source material. It's close to the original press release. But what I find is when my friends and family will come up to me and be like, "Did you hear about this one story?" And I hear kind of pieces of it, and I go, "Oh my God, that's like 4 months old. That's 2 years old." The farther you are away from the publish date, usually the wilder things are in there when like you get your Yahoo News or you get your like Dodo or you get whatever it is. I'm not saying those things are bad, but a lot of the
They're
time the
not
game of
great.
telephone has moved so far that you hear pieces where you're like, that's not what that said. And so I have to be the downer that's like, yes, I did read that a long time ago, and here's what the story actually was. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think I'm very often the scientific well actually.
Yes. Yep.
I'm sorry. No, I'm not. I'm not
Yeah.
sorry at all. We
Mhm.
have actually come to the end of our show though. I don't have any more stories to talk about. Do either of you? No.
Oh, I've got 3 more that just came up. Hang on a second.
No,
Let me-
we're going to finish the
What?
show right now because we're going to
Okay.
finish the show. Everybody, thank you so much for joining us. I hope that you have enjoyed all of the stuff that we've talked about. I hope that you found the interview valuable with Adriana Bankston earlier tonight. You know, find a little hope out there and have a little bit more connection to what's going on at Capitol Hill related to science. Additionally, I am, just so thankful to certain people who helped the show. So, Fada, thank you so much for your help with show notes. And thank you for the social media help. Last week, you put out an extra message when my power went out and we weren't able to make the show happen. There were, parental duties and other things. And so many apologies for not making it. But Fada, you allowed us to get that message out there. And I really appreciate that. On top of that, thank you to Gord, Arenlore, and so many others who helped to keep our chat rooms great places. All of you in the chat rooms who are here talking, thanks for keeping it real, right? And being nice and, respectful of everybody and having fun, being curious and having fun. Thank you to Identity 4 for recording the show and to Rachel for editing the show and to our Patreon sponsors. Thank you to Robert Norland, Lauren Gifford, Dana Lewis, Eden Mundell, Alan Viola, Aaron Anathema. Wait, did I start? I did. Wait, did I read that? Yes. Okay, hold on. Robert Norland, Robert W. Farley, Lauren Gifford, Dana Lewis, Eden Mundell, Alan Viola, Aaron Anathema, Arthur Kepler, Craig Potts, Mary Gertz, Teresa Smith, Richard Badge, Bob Coles, Kent Northcote, George Corris, Pierre Velazarb, John Ratnaswamy, Chris Wozniak, Begard Chefstad, Donathan Stiles, a.k.a. Don Stylo, Ali Coffin Schubru, Don Mundis, PIG, Stephen Alberon, Daryl Myshak, Andrew Swanson, Fredus 104, Paul Ronovich, Kevin Reardon, Noodles, Jack Brian Carrington, David A. Youngblood, Sean Clarence Lamb, John McKee, Greg Riley, Mark Hesselmo, Steve Leisman, a.k.a. Zima, Ken Hayes, Howard Tan, Christopher Rappin, Richard, Brendan Minish, Johnny Gridley, Remy Day, G. Burton Lattimore, Flying Out, Christopher Dreyer, RDM, Greg Briggs, John Atwood, Rudy Garcia, Dave Wilkinson, Rodney Lewis, Paul, Philip Shane, Kurt Larson, Craig Landon, Sue Doster, Jason Olds, Dave Neighbor, Eric Knapp, Lon Makes, EO, Adam Mishkan, Kevin Parachan, Bob Calder, Marjorie, Paul Disney, Patrick Pecoraro, and Tony Steele. Thank you all for supporting TWIS on Patreon. And if any of you out there are interested in being a TWIS supporter through the Patreon community, head over to twis.org, click on that Patreon link, and I will try and pronounce your name if you're if you support us at that level. On next week's show.
We will be back Wednesday, 8 p.m. Pacific Time, broadcasting live from our Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook channels.
Want to listen to us as a podcast? Just search for This Week in Science where podcasts are found. If you enjoyed the show, get your friends to subscribe as well.
For more information on anything you've heard here today, show notes Links to stories will be available on our website, www.twis.org, and you can sign up for Kiki's newsletter.
We love your feedback. If there's a topic you would like us to cover, address, or a suggestion for an interview, please let us know on one of our social media accounts, if you can find them, or send us an email. Just be sure to put TWIS, TWIS, in the subject line, or your email will neglect to be pollinated by a robot and will not germinate, grow, or arrive at our inboxes.
We look forward to discussing science with you again next week. And if you learned anything from the show, remember,
It's all in your head.
This week in science. This week in science. This week in science. This week in science, it's the end of the world. So I'm setting up shop, got my banner unfurled. It says the scientist is in, I'm gonna sell my advice. Show them how to stop the robots with a simple device. I'll reverse global warming with a wave of my hand. And all it'll cost you is a couple of grand. 'Cause this week's science is coming your way. So everybody listen to what I say. I use the scientific method for all that it's worth. And I'll broadcast my opinion all over the earth. 'Cause it's This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. 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 This Week in 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 Science.